Could Iran's Azeri region break away? Now that Israeli and US strikes have come to an end, attention is turning to the future of the Iranian regime. But tied to this is another critical question. Could the country also begin to fracture along ethnic fault lines? One of the largest groups is the country's Azeri community. Numbering in the tens of millions, could they capitalise on the recent conflict to try to break away and either pursue independence or attempt to unite with neighbouring Azerbaijan? Hello and welcome, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict and security. Throughout history, wars have often opened the door to separatist uprisings. When countries are weakened by external threats, internal challenges can quickly gain momentum as ethnic and religious groups seize on post-conflict instability to push for greater autonomy or even independence. All this has come to the fore with the recent war against Iran. As the country faces the consequences of its military confrontation with Israel and the United States, questions have been asked about whether this might mark the beginning of internal instability. But aside from speculation about regime change, some are also asking whether the current instability could also lead to ethnic separatism. In particular, attention has fallen on the large and strategically significant Azeri population. But just how likely is this group to want to break away? To fully understand the issue, we must start with demographics. With a population of approximately 90 million, the Islamic Republic of Iran is remarkably diverse. In addition to the Persians, the country's largest ethnic group, it's also home to Kurds, Arabs, the Baloch, Turkmen and other groups. However, the most significant minority are the Azeris. Predominantly Shia Muslim, like most of Iran's Persian population, they speak a Turkic language. While estimates vary, it's believed that between 15 and 20 million Azeris live in Iran. This not only makes them the most significant minority within Iran, but also means that there are more Azeris living in Iran than in the Republic of Azerbaijan, where the population stands at approximately 10 million. Geographically, they're concentrated in the northwest, in the provinces of East Azerbaijan, West Azerbaijan, Ardabil and Zanjan, an area that borders the Republic of Azerbaijan, Armenia and Turkey. Although Iran, once known as Persia, has a rich history dating back to ancient times, our story begins in the early 19th century as Imperial Russia expanded into the Caucasus. Following a series of wars with the Persian Empire, large parts of the South Caucasus were ceded to Russia under the Treaty of Gulistan and the Treaty of Turkmenchai. As a result, the Azeri people were now divided between the two empires. Following on from this, the end of the First World War a century later marked another critical moment in two distinct ways. First of all, it saw the creation of an effective ethnic Azeri homeland when, in 1920, the USSR officially established the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic. Secondly, and crucially, as the new Soviet government distanced itself from Russia's imperial past, the two countries signed a peace treaty that saw the USSR renounce all territorial claims against Persia, including the Azeri-populated areas. But despite the treaty, relations between Moscow and Tehran remained tense during the interwar years as Persia, which was renamed Iran in 1935, tried to balance its relations between the USSR, Britain and Nazi Germany. This would have profound consequences when the Second World War broke out. In order to safeguard vital supply routes into the USSR, British and Soviet forces occupied Iran in 1941, overthrowing the country's Shah, or king, and replacing him with his son. Meanwhile, fears now grew that the Soviet Union was planning to seize and annex the north. This was seemingly confirmed when the USSR refused to withdraw at the end of the war and set up a puppet regime, the Azerbaijan People's Government. However, after this sparked one of the very first crises of the emerging Cold War, Stalin agreed to withdraw the Soviet troops. But while the people's government was quickly overthrown and Iranian authority was re-established, the loyalty of the Azeri population was now called into question. As a result, Tehran steadily sought to impose its political and cultural control over the area. For the next 30 years, the Azeri people, like the rest of the country, remained under the tight control of the Shah's regime, which came down hard on any sense of Azeri ethnic activism. But while the 1979 Iranian Revolution saw the overthrow of the monarchy and the introduction of strict theocratic rule, little changed for Iran's ethnic minorities. Although the new religious regime promised equality and Islamic unity, in practice it was also highly suspicious of any ethnic identity movements. But while the early years of the revolution witnessed several ethnic uprisings by Kurds, Arabs and the Baloch, many of which were violently suppressed, there was never a major Azeri revolt. What opposition existed tended to be limited to occasional protests and calls for greater recognition of the Azeri language and culture. Nevertheless, the regime continued to clamp down hard on any public displays of ethnic identity and maintained strict controls on minority language media and education. All this became even more pronounced following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. As the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic now became an independent country, the Republic of Azerbaijan, Iranian fears of separatist sentiment grew even further, leading to ever tighter controls. But while it was clear that the Iranian authorities always feared Azeri separatism, just how much of a threat was it in real terms? In truth, it appeared relatively low, especially compared with the other separatist movements in the country. Although there's been some secessionist sentiment in the past, the Azeris in Iran have traditionally shown little desire to break away. Despite sharing ethnic, linguistic and cultural ties with an independent state just across the border, it would be incorrect to see the Azeris as outsiders or somehow marginal to the Iranian state, let alone assume that they would want to join Azerbaijan. Throughout history, the Azeris have played a pivotal role in Iran's development. For instance, the Safavid dynasty, which established Shiism as Persia's religion and laid the foundations of modern Iran in the 16th century, was of Azeri Turkic origin. And even today, many of Iran's political elites, military leaders and cultural icons have been of Azeri descent. Indeed, even Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, is of Azeri heritage. Likewise, the current president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, is also of Azeri origin. And it's this deep integration that has in turn helped suppress separatist sentiment. Rather than viewing themselves as a foreign minority, many Azeris have traditionally seen themselves as central to Iran. However, it would be incorrect to assume that the absence of general separatism is based solely on historical integration. Like much of Iranian society, the Azeris have their grievances, but they appear to have calculated that they stand to lose more than they'll gain by pursuing separatism, especially in a repressive political environment where the state takes harsh measures against any and all opponents. But all this said, while there's traditionally been little sign of a formal, large-scale or organised ethnic separatist movement, this isn't to say that it's been wholly absent. Within the country, there've been persistent, low-level nationalist and autonomous movements amongst segments of the Azeri population. But while these have occasionally had separatist undertones, they've in fact tended to focus on even greater cultural and linguistic rights. Instead, the limited pro-independence activism that has existed has tended to be based outside of Iran amongst dissident communities in Europe and elsewhere. The most prominent of these is the Southern Azerbaijan National Awakening Movement, SANAM, which is based in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. And this brings us to the vital question of Azerbaijan's role. Although Iran has frequently accused Azerbaijan of stoking secessionist sentiment, in reality, for most of the time, it appears as though the Azerbaijani government has steered well clear of encouraging pro-independence feeling, especially as it felt that this would unnecessarily antagonise Tehran. However, in recent years, the dynamics have shifted. Relations between Iran and Azerbaijan have become steadily more strained, particularly over Baku's close ties to Israel. Indeed, Azerbaijan has emerged as one of Israel's key allies in the region, supplying energy and allowing Israeli intelligence operations near Iran's border. I hope you're finding this useful. If so, please do give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I produce regular videos exploring international politics, conflict and security. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. The question now, of course, is whether Azeri independence sentiment could start to change in the aftermath of the recent war against Iran. On balance, it would seem unlikely. On the one hand, while Iranian authorities are certainly concerned about potential Azeri separatism, especially if it appears to be manipulated by outside powers, most Iranian Azeris have so far shown little interest in the idea and certainly haven't pushed for any sort of large-scale rebellion. Once again, what nationalist sentiment seems to exist amongst the Azeri population in Iran has tended to focus on cultural and linguistic rights, rather than outright independence, let alone unification with neighbouring Azerbaijan. But of course, balanced against this, there's also the argument that any nationalist sentiment has in fact been kept in check through repression. In this sense, or so the argument goes, Iran's weakened position following the war might now encourage separatist voices, especially as pro-independence movements often seek to capitalise on government fragility in such situations. The problem is that now that the direct conflict has ended between Iran and Israel, the government's focus will almost certainly shift towards maintaining internal stability and protecting the regime. Despite the damage they've sustained during the recent war, the Iranian security services seemingly remain strong on the ground. Any significant separatist movement would likely face swift and brutal repression. And lastly, it's essential to consider the broader aspects of the question of Azeri separatism. Even if a significant portion of the Azeri population in Iran were to demand independence or even unification with Azerbaijan, it's far from guaranteed that any external actor would be willing to back such a move, let alone all 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, which would be necessary if the region then sought full independence and membership of the United Nations. Nevertheless, despite all the apparent difficulties, the question of Azeri separatism remains an issue worth monitoring closely. In the aftermath of the recent war, Iran could become even more unstable, especially if outside actors see an opportunity to continue weakening the country through various covert means. Meanwhile, if widespread opposition to the regime grows elsewhere and the state's capacity to respond to multiple threats diminishes, the possibility may arise for Azeri nationalist sentiment to find an outlet. Once this happens, it could reveal a surprising level of pent-up support for Azeri separatism. Additionally, Azerbaijan might also seize the opportunity to become more involved in feeding separatism. And it's for all these reasons, as Iran emerges from the recent conflict and may be entering a phase of intense internal upheaval, that the possibility that the Azeris could in fact rise up cannot be entirely dismissed, even if, by historical standards and current estimates, this appears extremely unlikely. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.